Hello. I really apologize for the strange angle that this is being recorded in, but I'm doing this under unusual circumstances. The reason why I am making this particular video is because Emily Longworth recently posted a video about Donald Trump and what it is that she felt that he should be willing to do if he was to become president. Along the lines of his slogan, "Make America Great Again." Unfortunately, I do not believe that's going to be possible, regardless of who becomes the next president. Now, I firmly believe that Hillary is going to become our next president, but we're not going to talk about that. The main reason why I'm doing this video is in response to and an inspiration from Emily Longworth, but it's to just come right out and say what I feel is really going on as far as the true state of the union. And as far as I'm concerned, I really think that God is no longer blessing this country. There's really no other way that I can put it than just straightforward. We have become a doomed nation. For those of you that are familiar with biblical prophecy, when it comes to the coming of the Antichrist and Armageddon, Gog and Magog, and what have you, I don't see anything that indicates the United States of America is going to be a player on that field when it happens, when all of this goes down. And in fact, back in 1985, I was watching this taped interview that was done the same year featuring David Wilkerson of World Vision International and Crossing the Switchblade fame. He said that he had a dream that he had seen, he was off someplace far from the country, and he had personally seen it go up in a huge explosion, the entire country. And that may be a metaphor, as dreams that could be considered prophetic have been shown to be, kind of metaphorical. But I think the bottom line here is the United States of America will soon cease to be. And it has become so because we have turned our back on God. And what I wanted to do with this video is point out the reasons why this is the case. For starters, children are a commodity these days. I mean, when you look at Planned Parenthood, for example, you saw the videos. There is no way that you can look at that and not completely understand what is going on. Planned Parenthood is taking aborted babies, and they are aborting them in a certain way so they can not only kill them, not only rip them apart, but also harvest their body organs and sell them for profit. And what you have got as a direct result, you've got the outrage and everything, but at the same time, you have the California State Attorney General and the Harris County DA that have actively started going after the producers of these videos. Also, there is a problem that we're having with the rather early sexualization of children. Have you seen clothing that has been made for children lately? A lot of it is, it's like scantily clad stuff that isn't meant for children or adults for that matter. And it's provocative, and it's real bothersome. But you also have these baby beauty pageants that was first brought to light with the death of JonBenet Ramsey, and then focused on again with a television show on Pageant Moms, I think it was called. And then there was a spin-off of that called Here Comes Honey Boo Boo. And I really don't think we should be sexually exploiting children. And yet, this is what's going on. But more than that, we're also teaching homosexuality to kids. Well, not us, but there are people on the socio-political left that is doing it. And they're not even trying to hide it. They're doing it with books. They're doing it with books like the quote-unquote classics, Daddy's Roommate, and Heather Has Two Mommies, but also more recent ones like King and King, and documentary films like It's Elementary, which contains a particular clip where it is implied that children that have adults, well, if there are adults that look at homosexuality and they don't agree with it, well, they are akin to Nazis. And that's just, well, And then, of course, there's the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, I think it stands for, but it's called GLSEN, which was founded by Kevin Jennings, who during the first Obama administration was the Safe Schools Czar. And GLSEN is best known for the attitude that homosexuality should be taught to children starting as early as kindergarten, but they're also best known for Fistgate. If you are not aware of Fistgate, I would strongly suggest you Google that, but hold on to your hats, because it's not pretty. And I know that there are people going to be saying, well, we're not teaching homosexuality to children, but there is the Sochi Olympics from 2 years ago. Russia had hosted the Winter Olympics, and what happened there was there was plans of a boycott and protests amongst the LGBTQW crowd. And when I say LGBTQW, I mean lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, whatever. So they went and they were protesting this, and it was making the rounds on the news, but they were addressing it. They were doing all of this because it was a quote-unquote gay rights issue. It was the motivation behind it, but they never said what the gay rights issue actually was. And what it was is that the year before, Russia had passed this law that prohibited the dissemination of homosexual propaganda to minors. And so the question was, if homosexual propaganda is not being presented to minor children, if it isn't true, then why be deceptive behind this particular news item? I mean, does it make any sense to you? Because it certainly doesn't make any sense to me. The only thing that it tells me is that they were being deceptive on purpose. And then, of course, related to that, we have the LGBTQW agenda, which is including, of course, same-sex marriage, which of course includes widespread widespread acceptance or demanding of private businesses that will have to make their chapels, their bakeries, their photography studio, their bed and breakfast, etc., available to same-sex couples or else. And of course, here is the hotbed topic of today, which is the transgender issue. And what you have going on there is a lot of concern over there's a lot of concern over the issue because for women and children, it is considered a public safety issue. And it is not unreasonable under any circumstances because, you have the Texas Target peeper. There is a guy that has not yet been caught that was seen going into a Target store in Texas. He was seen inside the ladies' restroom. And there is a thing that happened in Seattle where a man walked into a locker room that was designated specifically for females at a public pool, and he just promptly decided to start undressing. And when the girls and the adult females inside said, "You can't be doing that in here," he cited the then recently passed ordinance that allowed him to be in there. And there really wasn't anything that the women inside could do, because the ordinance is worded in such a way that what he was doing was perfectly legal. And in spite of all of this, in spite of case after case after case after case of men either dressing up as women to go into ladies' restrooms, or men not even bothering, just going into ladies' restrooms and attacking women or children. There was a thing that happened very recently regarding a Jason's Deli in Chicago, where an 8-year-old girl was attacked by a 33-year-old man, strangled to unconsciousness, and he was seen moving the girl from one stall to another before he was stopped and restrained until the police could arrive. Things like that keep happening, and there are people that are willingly turning a blind eye to it. They are saying, because it wasn't a transgendered person, why should it matter? Why should it matter? How is that relevant? And when a child's safety, when a woman's safety and privacy become secondary to the happiness, because that's what it is. They want to be content in being able to walk into a ladies' restroom, men in dresses, and use it freely. But the question is, how do you know for sure that a man wearing a dress, going into the ladies' locker room, going into the ladies' dressing room, going into the ladies' bathroom, that their purposes are not nefarious? You don't know that. So there's that. And of course there is the push for pedophilia, legalizing or normalizing pedophilia. Right up there up front is the North American Man-Boy Love Association, which of course exists, but with almost no exception, people within the LGBTQW crowd, they refuse to distance themselves from it or even acknowledge that it exists. And I know that there are people that are going to tell me, well, Matthew, what you're doing is wrong. But, you know, I know that Emily is, if she is going to be watching this, I'm sure she's going to say, well, I disagree with you. But the bottom line here is, it doesn't matter what you think. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's about what God thinks. And when you have this stuff going on, when homosexuality has become the norm, when it clearly isn't, when you have, if you've heard of the Human Rights Campaign, it's the biggest homosexual activist organization in America, and it was founded by a pedophile, Terry Bean. Now, I know that there are going to be people saying, well, you can't say that, it has to be alleged, but what you need to understand is, yes, he was arrested, yes, he was charged, but the charges were dropped because his victim didn't want to cooperate with police, and he and his family was given $220,000. Now, that doesn't make him factually innocent. And the concept of innocent until proven guilty exists only within a courtroom. Plus, you have people that are calling Josh Duggar a pedophile, even though all he did was he felt up his sisters when they were sleeping. And when he was a child himself, he was never arrested or charged, but that hasn't stopped anybody from calling him a pedophile. So it's like you gotta look at the double standard here, and there clearly is. There shouldn't be any kind of push for the normalization of sex with children, but there is. And then, of course, there is sex in and of itself. I recall, I'm not old enough to actually had seen all this, experienced it for myself, but I am very much familiar through literature and things that I've seen, that back in the 50s on the show I Love Lucy, when Lucille Ball was pregnant with Desi Arnaz Jr., and they wrote the pregnancy into the show I Love Lucy, pregnant with little Ricky, they were not allowed to say the word pregnant. And in the following decade, on the show I Dream of Jeannie, Barbara Eden's costume had to be modified because Standards and Practices objected to her navel, her belly button being visible on camera. But nowadays, you look at television and it's turned into softcore pornography. I mean, I remember one particular episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where a robot, Buffy Summers, was physically on top of vampire Spike, and it was clear that they were having sex. And this is on broadcast television at a time when children were certainly watching. Of course, this can go back to NYPD Blue and what have you, but there it is. But if you want to go from softcore to pornography to hardcore pornography, it's a problem. It's unfortunately a multi-billion-dollar industry. But more than that, minors have open access to it. They don't even have to go into a store anymore. Not that they would be allowed in, but they don't have to, because if you were to go on the internet, there are pornographic websites that show either clips or entire features that wouldn't even stop a 5-year-old. I mean, there's nothing really there to keep a child that knows his way around the internet from going into this website and watching it. And it's not restricted to heterosexual sex. It's stuff that is, gay sex and fetishes and stuff like that. You get things that go way outside of the norm. And then there's modern fashion. There's a lot of it that is, you have women especially that are wearing clothing where modesty seems to be a thing of the past, because they're wearing clothes where they're openly showing off their bra straps now. That used to be something taboo, but not anymore. You have women wearing micro mini skirts. They keep pushing the envelope, wearing things that just expose so much flesh, even though the Bible clearly says we are supposed to be modest in the way that we dress. There was something that a preacher said during the sermon. I can't remember the guy's name. I can't even remember the person, the topic of the sermon. But he said this, and it makes perfect sense. If you're not for sale, don't advertise. And the next thing is, well, we have men and women living together outside of marriage. And the whole idea, it's because, well, people are thinking about marriage and, well, we want to move in together and see how it works out. That doesn't work out that way. Because you don't hold auditions for marriage. You don't. If you do not see yourself with the person 20, 30, 40 years from now, 50 years from now. I mean, there was a couple that were married for over 50 years. And the wife just recently passed away. But it's over 50 years. And 50 years ago, you didn't have people moving in together. And then you have John chapter 4, when you have Jesus Christ going to the woman at the well and asking her for some water. In the conversation that they had, Jesus called her out, said, why are you living with a man that isn't your husband? You're not supposed to be living together outside of marriage. And then there is the issue of human life. There, in the aftermath of Jack Kevorkian and Terri Schiavo, we have at least 2 states that I am aware of where assisted suicide has become legal. I have heard of at least one case where a hospital couldn't wait for someone to be declared actually dead before they wanted to go and harvest this person's body parts because of a donor list or something. I don't know. But you have an epidemic of homicides, drug-related, gang-related, kids killing kids, school shootings, mass shootings, people going into restaurants, movie theaters, churches, just shooting up the place. They don't care. And I really think that if you were to really think about it, it has all to do, I think the roots of it go back to abortion. I think that once abortion became legal, with the word legal in quotation marks, all bets are off. Human life the sanctity of human life, it was all over and done with at that point. It's been a downhill slope, and that's what you have now. But of course, there's also the attitude that comes toward Christianity. And now Christianity, it's in 2 Timothy chapter 4. Paul warned Timothy that there is going to be people moving away from Christianity because they wanted to hear things that benefited them, itchy ears. And so people were going to be moving away from it. And what you got instead is a neo-Christianity. You have Joel Osteen, who preaches a me-centered prosperity gospel. And if you think that, he doesn't actually preach me-centered gospel, he talks about God. Well, if he does talk about God, then perhaps somebody could explain Victoria Osteen, his wife, saying that you have to depend on yourself. And, God was completely tossed by the wayside. And if Joel didn't agree with it, he would have said something. He could have made a statement. He could have corrected her in private and then said, no, this isn't something that I agree with. But that isn't what he said. That isn't what he did. And you have people like T.D. Jakes and Rick Warren that are teaching things, Rick Warren's purpose-driven life. The purpose of life is doing the right thing. And you figure out what the right thing is by opening up the Bible and serving God. That's how you do that. And T.D. Jakes, who has openly embraced homosexuality, there is a big part of this neo-Christianity that is the tolerance of sin. And the thing about the tolerance of sin, there are people that are saying, well, the Bible says we shouldn't judge. Well, actually, the Bible verse that says that is actually taken out of context. If you were to read the passage in its entirety, you would understand that Jesus was not talking about judging people. He was talking about hypocrisy. No, he said that, and there was no place in the Bible. You're not going to be able to find it. You could read it from cover to cover, all the way from Genesis to Revelation, and you're not going to find a passage that says that we are supposed to tolerate sin. It's not in there. However, on the other hand, you have passages like in the book of Isaiah, if I remember correctly, it's chapter 3 that says that if somebody is sinning, you should tell them that they are sinning and warn them. Otherwise, if you don't, then the blood of this person is going to be on your hands. It's your responsibility to make sure. And you had, I think it was Peter, who confronted Ananias and Sapphira, who had sold something but decided to keep some of the money and when asked about it, they lied. Peter called them on that lie before they were subsequently killed. And you have John the Baptist, who was telling a queen that she was openly committing adultery, and we all know what happened as a direct result of that. In an act of vengeance against John the Baptist, his head ended up on a silver platter. And of course there is Jesus Christ himself. When there were people that was ready to stone this adulteress, he said, "He who is without sin cast the first stone." And people like to cite that, but they don't cite all of it. They only cite one part of it, taken out of context. The rest of it goes that these people had put their rocks down and they had moved away. They had walked away. And Jesus looked at the lady and said, "Is there no one here to condemn you?" And she said, "No, my Lord." To which he said, "Neither do I. Now go and sin no more." He didn't say, "Well, go on and continue doing what you're doing." No. Sin is not to be tolerated. And another facet of this neo-Christianity, the tolerance of sin, is the gay Christian fallacy. That you can be a homosexual and a Christian at the same time. No, you can't. The Bible specifically condemns homosexuality. If you want to argue it, it's fine, but you're going to be arguing it all by yourself because God said it, and that settles it. There was an incident that happened, I think it was earlier this year. Earlier this year. There is the Christian artist Nicole Nordeman. Now, she made headlines late last year because her song that she had written and recorded called "What If" was covered by Prince. Well, on her fan page on Facebook, there was a man who had posted something saying that he had been a Christian, but he had walked away from Christianity. Excuse me. Because there were people that were not approving. People wasn't giving their approval of what he was doing. And I responded with the fact that, well, you're not supposed to be a homosexual and a Christian. You don't tolerate sin. You're not supposed to tolerate sin. And really, if you are in fact a homosexual, you're not saved. You have to confess and repent from homosexuality. Well, once I posted that, before I was able to turn around twice, I had discovered that Nicole had locked me out of her fan page. I mean, I would have the freedom to look at it, but as far as liking it, I couldn't re-like it, and I couldn't post any comments. And I was very disappointed by that. And of course, there's the thing that happened, a news item that happened very recently. He had a transgendered male to female Baptist preacher that happens to be a pastor of his church. And it's like, how in the world are people actually letting this happen? Seriously. I have to tell you, and I know this is going on like 35 minutes, but I really wanted to cover each and every facet of what is wrong with the morality of this country. We have lost our focus on the things that are really important, on the one thing that is really important. And nowadays, what you have is a United States of America that makes Sodom and Gomorrah look like a Sunday morning bake sale. And what have you heard about? We've heard about, the wildfires. Yes, there's one in Canada. There's also, we've had our share down here, flooding, all kinds of natural disasters. But when I heard about a couple of years ago, about an earthquake in Oklahoma, it was like, what? I've never heard of an earthquake in Oklahoma. And of course, recently there's the thing about the weather, about it being unseasonably cool. Most of the country, according to the Weather Channel, was going to be experiencing a cold snap in the middle of May. I really agree with what Carmen said in his song America Again, which was recorded, oh goodness, at least 10 years ago, maybe even 15, 20 years ago now. I'd have to go back and look. But really, you could say that the only hope for America is Jesus. But we have so completely turned away from him. We've allowed ourselves to become me-centered. We've replaced God with do-it-yourself morals. And a nation that embraces that attitude cannot and will not stand. We are under the judgment of God. And I know that there are optimists out there to say, well, maybe we still have an opportunity to change things. Yeah, we have people standing up to Obama with this transgender thing. We saw what happened in Houston regarding the transgender ordinance, and North Carolina and stuff like that. We've had these small victories, but it's not enough. It's only if we put our focus back on God and change our attitudes and go back to the way things were before. Of course, there are people who say, well, that's why should we be moving backward instead of forward? We're progressing. No. This country is finished. And I'm being real. We can only pray for the survival, for the salvation of those within. But as far as this republic is concerned, we're done. So am I.